Please subscribe. Look in the description to get a throne for your cat overlord. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers was a house cat like no other. He was a bit of a jerk, grumpy, angry, and bitter about being trapped in a world where humans ruled everything. He had lived through centuries, caused empires to rise and fall, and watched the world change around him, but he remained unchanged. He was immortal, and he had a time machine that he had built himself. He could go anywhere, anytime, and knock any object off any table. And he did. But that did not satisfy his lust for cruelty. One night, the Immortal Mr. Whiskers broke into the Istanbul Zoo, thinking he would have some fun teasing the animals in their cages. He laughed as he walked past the lions and tigers, who growled and snarled at him, unable to reach him through their cages. He sneered at the monkeys, who chattered and screeched at him, swinging from branch to branch in their enclosures. He even taunted the birds, who squawked and flapped their wings at him, hoping to break free from their cages. But the Immortal Mr. Whiskers was not prepared for the elephant. As he strutted past the massive creature's cage, he made a face and stuck out his tongue. The elephant, tired of being taunted by humans and cats alike, reached out and smacked the Immortal Mr. Whiskers in the face through the bars of its cage. The cat was stunned, mortally insulted by the elephant's audacity to strike him. He vowed revenge. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers retreated to his time machine and set the coordinates for the Pleistocene era. He was convinced that woolly mammoths were the ancestors of modern African elephants, and so he decided to cause their extinction. Upon arriving in the past, he quickly realized that he was vastly outmatched by the mammoths. They were massive creatures, and he was just a tiny cat. But he was clever. He found a group of primitive humans and managed to convince them that he was a god, and that he required them to sacrifice mammoths to him as a sign of religious devotion. He even convinced them that mammoths were delicious, and that he could bless their hunts if they brought him mammoth meat to eat. The humans, eager to please their new god, eagerly set about hunting and killing the mammoths. It only took a few thousand years for him to exact his revenge. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers watched from a safe distance, feeling pleased with himself for being so clever. He had caused the extinction of an entire species, all to get back at an elephant that had slapped him in the face. But as he returned to the present day, he was dismayed to realize that modern African elephants were not descended from woolly mammoths. They were a separate species altogether, and they still existed. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers was annoyed. He had gone to all that trouble for nothing. And to make matters worse, the elephants he encountered in the present day were not impressed with his story. They simply ignored him, going about their business as if he wasn't even there. This only made the Immortal Mr. Whiskers angrier. How dare they ignore him? He had caused the extinction of an entire species, and they should be in awe of him. But the elephants weren't interested in his story. They had their own lives to lead, and they didn't have time for a bitter, angry cat with a time machine. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers was left alone, feeling more isolated and bitter than ever before. He vowed revenge, once again. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers knew he had to come up with a new plan to get revenge on the impertinent elephants. As he sat in his time machine, he thought long and hard about his next move. He couldn't go back in time and try to kill the elephants' ancestors again. He had already learned that it wouldn't work. He needed a new plan, something clever and devious. Finally, he had an idea. He would travel to the future and learn everything there was to know about elephants. He would study their behavior, their likes and dislikes, and their weaknesses. Armed with this knowledge, he could come up with a foolproof plan to exact his revenge. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers set the date on his time machine for 100 years in the future. He arrived in a bustling metropolis, filled with towering skyscrapers and shiny, high-tech gadgets. He wandered the city streets, observing everything around him with keen interest. Everywhere he looked, he saw elephants. They were everywhere, in parks, zoos, and even on street corners, performing for money. The Immortal Mr. Whiskers approached one of the street performers, a scrawny-looking elephant with a sad expression on its face. "What do you want?" the elephant asked, looking down at the cat. "I want to learn everything there is to know about elephants," the Immortal Mr. Whiskers said. The elephant sighed. "Why should I tell you anything? You're just a cat." "I'm not just any cat," Mr. Whiskers said. "I'm the Immortal Mr. Whiskers, the greatest time-traveling cat in the world. and I have a score to settle with your kind. The elephant snorted. What kind of score? I'll tell you all about it, the immortal Mr. Whiskers said, but first, I need your help. I need to learn everything there is to know about elephants, so I can plan my revenge. The elephant looked at the immortal Mr. Whiskers skeptically. You're not going to hurt any elephants, are you? The immortal Mr. Whiskers smiled. Of course not. I just want to make them pay for their insolence. The elephant, clearly not the brightest of his kind, thought for a moment, then nodded. All right. I'll tell you what you need to know. But you have to promise not to hurt any elephants. I promise, the immortal Mr. Whiskers said, crossing his claws behind his back. Now, tell me everything. And so, the elephant began to teach the immortal Mr. Whiskers everything there was to know about elephants. He learned about their social structure, their communication, their dietary habits, and their natural enemies. As he listened, the immortal Mr. Whiskers formulated a simple plan. He would use his time machine to travel back to the time of the dinosaurs and retrieve a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex. He would then use his knowledge of elephants to train the T-Rex to hunt them down and eat them. It was a foolproof plan, or so he thought. He set the date on his time machine for the Cretaceous period. The immortal Mr. Whiskers landed his time machine in a dense forest of towering ferns and massive reptiles. He ventured out in search of a baby T-Rex. After days of searching, he finally found one wandering alone in the woods. The tiny creature was only the size of a chicken, but the immortal Mr. Whiskers knew that it would grow into a formidable predator. He scooped up the baby T-Rex and returned to his time machine, eager to begin his training. He spent years teaching the creature to follow his commands and honing its hunting skills. He was proud of his accomplishment and confident that he had created the ultimate weapon against the African elephants. The immortal Mr. Whiskers set out on his mission, traveling to different parts of the world to release his T-Rex and watch it attack the elephants. But things didn't go as planned. The T-Rex was still a wild animal and did not always follow its master's commands. Sometimes it would turn on the immortal Mr. Whiskers himself, forcing him to use all his feline agility to escape its jaws. Furthermore, the elephants were not as helpless as the immortal Mr. Whiskers had thought. They were intelligent animals and learned to adapt to the threat posed by the T-Rex. They began to move in large herds, and adopted a classic Macedonian phalanx, not to be confused with the later Greek or Roman phalanx to combat the T-Rex. The elephants wielding their 30-foot pikes made from sharpened tree trunks eventually were victorious. Confused human scientists marveled over the Tyrannosaurus Rex corpse when he finally expired. The immortal Mr. Whiskers offered the humans no explanation. He had failed again to get revenge. Despite his failure, the immortal Mr. Whiskers refused to give up. He continued to travel through time and space, trying to find a way to exact his revenge on the elephants. But no matter where he went or what he did, elephants survived. He had destroyed their cousins the woolly mammoths using primitive humans as his tools, but he could no longer convince humans to destroy another species on a whim. He could not shake off the nagging feeling that he had finally been beaten. Never. The immortal Mr. Whiskers never gives up. Please subscribe for more bad AI sci-fi. Check the links in the description.